Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
Go above and beyond.
they become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%.
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
With Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. My guest today is Dustin Strong. He's a holistic nutritionist. He's a health, wellness, and lifestyle counselor, educational speaker. The initiative is called Strong on Health. The website is also strongonhealth.com. And we're going to talk about lithium and the role it has in brain health and body health. So welcome, Dustin. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, tell me a bit about your background and how you first learned about lithium, and then we'll get into that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm a nutritionist first and foremost, and there's a greater, longer story there, but it just makes the way I see the world, the lens I see the world is whether or not we're getting all of the chemistry into our bodies that satisfy all the physiological needs. And it was a few years back, I came across a little town in West Texas called Mineral Wells, and they have obviously high levels of minerals in their water. And they had a company called Crazy Water, and the Crazy Water...
I like Crazy Water.
You've had it? Okay.
I'm in Austin, Texas, so they still sell it in stores. You know? The 2, the 3, the 4, it's more alkaline, etc.
Exactly, yeah. That was just it, is they're leaning on the alkalinity piece, but the history is that a crazy person drank from the well and stopped being crazy. So that's why they called it Crazy Water. And like you said, number 4, it's different wells. Number 4 had higher than normal levels of lithium in it. And that is what piqued my interest initially. And come to find out, there have been 3,123 different lithium measurements in the state of Texas, 126 different counties. And the research was actually started here really powerfully on its association with mood. And they found an inverse relationship between the amounts of lithium and the levels of violent crime and suicide, which I thought was something everybody should know about.
Well, the only lithium I've heard about is for people that have severe psychological distress, like psychotic. I guess it's termed, I don't know which kind of form of lithium it is, but it's termed to be like an antipsychotic, but incredibly powerful. Is that the lithium you're referring to, or are there different forms that are different?
That's exactly a great question, because that's where most people's brains go. They remember, that it's got this stigma, that she must be off her lithium or he must be off his lithium. And that there is a medication that is a form called lithium carbonate, and that is actually on the World Health Organization's list of essential medications for bipolar disorder because it is so effective. In fact, a lot of doctors have called it the most effective therapy in psychiatry. But what I also came to learn is that there's a difference in how you get it in water and how it's being presented in that medication. The second name in any mineral really is a tremendous difference in how well your body can actually utilize it. And
yeah, like I found a supplement recently called lithium orotate. So anyway, I was going to ask you.
That's exactly right. There's multiple forms, and lithium orotate actually has been shown for decades now in lots of practice to be one of the best ways that your body can utilize it in much smaller amounts than that they're doing in the medication, and it's much safer and easier on the body as well. So the limits with the medication are that it can be very destructive to the kidneys because they're doing very high levels. They have the doses start between 300 to 900 milligrams. I actually am working with an individual right now that was on 1,800 milligrams a day, whereas they found that as low as 5 milligrams a day, you can actually see a measurable impact on somebody of the lithium orotate versus the carbonate. So yeah, that form really changes the conversation about lithium powerfully.
Well, I mean, do healthy people have lithium orotate? Do we get it from any of our interactions in the world, through food or just respiration, or how does anyone come in contact with any form of lithium that would be beneficial?
Even better question. Yeah, it is something. So here's the conversation we have to start, and I don't think has been fully accepted yet, is that it should be considered an essential nutrient, just like potassium or magnesium. And you would get it from the soil. You would get it from water, actually, and that's why crazy water number 4 is a great carrier for one of the most bioavailable forms or multiple forms of lithium that you can get. So you can get it from foods. Some of the foods that would be highest would be nuts and seeds. Black-eyed peas tend to be very high in them. But the caveat to that is it has to be in a region where there's known to be lithium in the soil. So we actually have these great maps across the United States that do show, because of all of this research on it, some areas in Texas have very, very, very little lithium in the water, and others have high levels. So it depends on where it's sequestered in the soil across the nation. And we have great data on that. But India did a lot of research into this, and they were looking at the different levels in food. And one thing that they decided to do was to include tobacco in their research, because so many people, tobacco is such a big part of the culture. And they actually discovered that tobacco has 18 times more lithium than any of the other foods. It was the highest concentration of lithium.
Do you think that may be associated with why people get addicted to it and why maybe they feel temporarily a better sense of well-being while they smoke?
I would go beyond speculation to say, after knowing what I know about lithium and what it can do for neurotransmitters and balancing neurotransmitters, I would say absolutely that is a big piece of what people were getting from it. They say that a pack a day gives you about 0.3 milligrams. I think, I could be wrong in the conversion there, but you're getting a significant amount from smoking it as well. And that's what is created this other conundrum that people have been looking at, is this research suggesting that lifetime smokers enjoy a 77% reduction in Parkinson's or Parkinsonianisms. And so there's that other connection to lithium and its protection of the brain and how much it can really impact your nervous system in general, and not just the neurotransmitters.
So, all right. So again, in what capacity are you using lithium? Are you just studying it, or are you administering it, or, what is your role in understanding lithium and using it?
Yeah, a little bit of everything there, because I've been teaching very aggressively on alternatives for people for mental health. And I think we've been kind of funneled into this belief that diet doesn't impact our mental health and that medications are the only option. And so I want to educate as much as I can about lithium, because specifically being probably one of the most powerful things to help protect people against suicide, number one. So I am doing more and more research on it, but I have found ways to develop and make it available to people. So I have, after exhaustive research, did agree with you. I think the lithium orotate is the best to give people as an option to have. Well, second only to getting it from the water. So I've always had the crazy water number 4 available in my clinic for people to get started on their mental health journey. But beyond just the lithium, I've been looking for ways to make sure that the lithium is giving the greatest impact. And one of the barriers that we have with nutrients when it comes to mental health specifically is crossing that blood-brain barrier. And I think this is why you can see the difference in things like lithium carbonate. There's a lot of chemistry required to be able to make it bioavailable versus the orotate. But one thing that I think, and I'm currently doing a lot more research on, is this synergy that you find with certain minerals in nature and other components in nature, specifically found in lion's mane mushroom for this case, that help transport that lithium across the blood-brain barrier so that we are getting a quicker effect and more protective effect for individuals who are struggling with mental health, and specifically suicidal ideation.
Oh, how much more does the lion's mane carrier affect the lithium transport? What effects do you see versus not?
Yeah, so I can only speak clinically in this, quite honestly. So in some cases, like when I have individuals who come to me who are hoping to find ways to transition off the lithium carbonate, because what they do is they check the blood levels and they're going off of the mood, and specifically often with autistic children it's being used. So the first step is what I will do is I'll provide them with an organic source of lion's mane mushrooms that are high in the The component we're looking at is called aranacines, and they tend to immediately get a better result. And so they can start to titrate down the high amounts of lithium and still maintain the same result from a mood standpoint. And then the danger starts to back off of what's in the blood with that. So it's only been clinically, there's multiple doctors that I've been providing this combination for across the country. But the reports that I'm getting back have been so encouraging that I would really like to be able to take it to the next level and see if we can get this into a laboratory where we can actually show the delivery of this being much greater as they are with other nutrients now.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now back to the show.
Well, I mean, people that take this lithium orotate with the mushrooms in it, what do they report? How long does it take for it to build up in their body or transition them to a good state? And what do they feel?
Yeah, the great thing about lithium is that usually it's about an hour and a half before it shows up in the bloodstream when it's ingested. So people are reporting noticeable changes with very, very, very quickly. I've had doctors who they always, try it on themselves first, who are already reporting that they have better mental clarity, just calmer. The thing about lithium is that if you have high levels of neurotransmitters, it works as almost an adaptogenic effect. It will help clear excess neurotransmitters, things like glutamate, things like dopamine, things like serotonin. If they're too high, you have too much activity in the brain, and it helps calm it down so that you can respond instead of react to a lot of things. So that's been some of the greatest reports we're getting, is people just feeling a sense of calm, sense of being able to respond. But as I was saying before, like many people used to call cigarettes a perfect drug because if you're too excited, it will calm you down. But they would also say that if they needed to pick me up, it would pick them up. And that's actually true of lithium. If you have low levels of those neurotransmitters, glutamate, serotonin, dopamine, will help to increase those levels so that you have an appropriate level in the synapse. It's a really smart mineral, and I think that everybody should be aware of how this is absolutely should be a part of an essential nutritional profile for humans.
Does that mean it's also classed as a mood stabilizer?
I don't know if classed as that, but it has been reported in a lot of the literature to have mood stabilizing effects. It's been noted in a lot of literature. And mostly what they're looking at is the levels of lithium in drinking water. But now, unfortunately, the bulk of the research is just on lithium carbonate, especially now for Alzheimer's and dementia. So I would really, really like to be able to see a lot more research on just lithium orotate, for example, just to give us a greater understanding of the different forms and how they impact health.
Yeah, it's not a drug though, so they're probably not going to do anything with it. They're going to want to push for, you're going to want to push forward their drug they can charge a ton for and regulate and all that. They don't want natural stuff like this, from my experience.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, you can't patent something that occurs in nature. So the financial interest for a pharmaceutical company is going to be a lot lower, obviously, than something that they can create a specific molecule for that doesn't occur in nature. That way they can patent it and have the intellectual property. So yes.
Right.
You are right. The stockholders in these pharmaceutical companies would probably not be as happy, with them promoting something they can't make as much money off of.
Yeah. I had read just briefly with lithium orotate that it could impact thyroid function. Have you heard anything about that? Have you observed, anyone clinically that takes lithium orotate regularly and looks at their thyroid hormones and see if there's any effect?
That's another great question. And so the two things that people would be most concerned about. Now, I always want to find out when people mention things like that. I don't know why that it's happening. I want to know why it's happening. And I have not seen anything that is consistent with that in my own clinical research or the clinical research of any of the practitioners that I've introduced this to. But I'm sure that if we took enough time and sat down and really thought about it, we could probably find a means. Now, I will say this. The thyroid is one of the greatest places in the body that sequesters iodine, another mineral that I don't think is respected enough or ingested enough in humans. And approximately 20% of the dry weight of the brain is also iodine. So there may be some kind of interaction there or competition between the lithium and the iodine that could at some point impact the thyroid. And there may be other mechanisms, but that's the only one that I can really think of that could be the possibility. Beyond the fact that they both also help to detoxify heavy metals like mercury that have a negative impact on the brain and the thyroid.
Oh, what do you mean? Does the lithium orotate like chelate mercury or other heavy metals, or what? Not heavy metals, but toxins, sorry.
Yeah, chelation is a form of pulling heavy metals out of the body, detoxifying. There's two things that have to be thought of when you're detoxifying heavy metals, and one is pulling and chelating, but you also need to bring in the minerals that the body actually needs to push them out. So they're replacing where that heavy metal was and actually bringing function to the body. You see this most abundantly with the iodine versus fluoride or chlorine or bromine. When people have been exposed to too much fluoride and they start to take iodine, they can actually see a flushing around their thyroid in the skin because the body's literally pushing, that iodine is actually pushing out those chemicals. So it'll do the same and push out mercury, and lithium will do the same thing. It'll help push out mercury. One doctor reported that all he needed to do to help correct this one individual's mercury toxicity is provide him with a little bit of lithium orotate. And from a behavioral standpoint, it was night and day from one day to the next, from suicidal ideation to feeling like life is good, just from one application of it. So there can be some very dramatic changes once you bring it in.
That's amazing. So again, in regards to thyroid, have you seen any issues with it, or it doesn't seem to come up at the dosages that people are taking? Let's say 5 milligrams a day or something.
Yeah, I would have to take a deeper dive into, again, why that would be happening. I have not seen it clinically, and I haven't had it reported to me. So there may be a reason that I'm not aware of. But when it comes to the thyroid, the problem is science, it's very hard to be looking at one individual piece truly being the thing that is changing the thyroid, because there's so many chemicals that are affecting the thyroid, so many hormones. So it's very hard to isolate it out and say, it's this. Now, it could be also the lithium carbonate form, because it is harder for the body to be able to metabolize and utilize. That could be causing that. So specifically, the orotate, I have not seen that yet. Not to say that it's not possible. It's just not something that I've had reported to me at all.
But with lithium carbonate, have you heard of adverse thyroid consequences?
I've read of that being a warning on that there can be adverse effects. But remember this always, Richard, the poison's in the dose, right? And if we're getting things the way that nature would have provided them for us, as in if you're looking at the levels in water, if you look at the areas around the world that have the highest concentrations of it in the water, we have to look at those populations and put that versus this research that is saying that to determine whether or not there truly are thyroid conditions that are due to lithium, or is it due to the lithium carbonate? And the research has been only on the medication lithium carbonate that would be leading to any suspicion or concern over thyroid function.
Well, like I have thyroid cancer, I lost my thyroid in the war, as I like to say. So I take, Synthroid and stuff. So I just wonder how lithium orotate would interact with that, or would it? I'm a special case though. So.
That is a special case. So I understand your concern. I just want to remember, if you were drinking water or eating foods that were in an area like you are in Texas, and I encourage you to look up the map. You can see a map of Texas and where it has it. You're already probably getting it from food and water if you're in the right place in Texas. And you got to think about it balancing other minerals. And that's one of the things we have to always remember, that all of these minerals have counterparts and balancing agents. So it is always best to get things from a whole food source as best as you possibly can. So in your case, would I suggest that you were supplementing with it? Probably I would encourage you to supplement by drinking crazy water number 4, because that's going to be one of the most balanced ways that you can get it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Versus taking an actual supplement.
Like the mushroom, the lion's mane, lithium orotate combo, though, would that be, potentially too much, or who knows? Or just out of an abundance of caution, be careful?
No, I wouldn't caution that. I think if you take lion's mane, I think all that's going to do is help deliver it beyond the blood-brain barrier to the brain. And the beautiful thing about lion's mane is it also contains something called ergothioneine. And I don't know if you're familiar with that yet, but it's a very powerful antioxidant. And it actually is something that you definitely want to be able to get into the brain to help reduce oxidative stress in the brain. So it's only going to help enhance the function. It's not going to be forcing function to have something from a whole food source like lion's mane.
Okay. Well, very good. So what's the best place for people to find out more and, maybe to order that supplement, the Lion's Mane Lithium Orotate combo?
Well, I always encourage people to read a little bit more. My website is strongonhealth.com, and I have several blog posts I've written about the Texas connection on lithium and mental health, and so they can read more about the research on there. And always in those, I'm going to leave a link there for people who can, if they're looking for it, find more about what we call the company that we support is Great Minds Mushrooms. So it's the lithium combined with a lion's mane mushroom, and then it's a whole food base of blackstrap molasses. So it really provides a much better synergy overall for the utilization. So yeah, that'd probably be the best way to do it. Or you can go straight to greatmindsmushrooms.com and you can find out more about it there as well.
Okay, well, very good. Thank you for coming on the podcast and talking about this. It's very interesting, and I think it may be a great alternative because, again, lithium is, from what I've seen, seems to be a very scary alternative for a lot of people. So if it could be taken in a much safer way, that's fantastic.
And also, Richard, beyond just the mental health piece, I do think that people should be aware that there is ongoing research about the protective benefits of it for long-term cognitive decline. The research was started in Denmark, where they were looking at the correlation between the water and the rates of dementia. And again, there was an inverse relationship. There was a four-lenses study. So there's a lot of great studies showing that we do want to make sure that we're finding some of this into our lives as best we can. And for you personally, as you just mentioned about your thyroid condition, there's another thing that a lot of people don't know about that I would encourage you to do some more research into, and it's called a protomorphogen for thyroid. There's a company called Standard Process that created thytrophin PMG, and it can be very protective and helpful for individuals who have had damage done to their thyroid.
Okay. I know Standard Process, the brand, yeah. So it's called thyrotropin or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's best to find a practitioner who, is working with them because they do make sure that they have specific practitioners that know how to utilize their products. But yeah, it's called thytrophin PMG. That's their protomorphogen. And it's a nucleic extract of the thyroid that has been found to be very beneficial for a lot of people who are struggling with thyroid conditions.
Well, very good. Well, thank you, Dustin. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you for coming on this podcast.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely my pleasure. I wish you all the best. And I hope that this reaches somebody who needed to hear this, because I really think with the rates of suicide we have going on out there, people do need to know of this as an option, and there are safe options. There's a lot more that I would provide people with. And if anybody has any questions, they can definitely reach out to us at our clinic. And particularly, I do want to make this aware that anybody who's a veteran, I do see them for free for the first visit to make them aware of their options, because I do feel like the rates of suicide in our veterans is disproportionately high. And I want to do anything I can to help them know about all of their options.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you, Dustin.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.
People with, and if anybody has any questions, they can definitely reach out to us at our clinic. And particularly, I do want to make this aware that anybody who's a veteran, I do see them for free for the first visit to make them aware of their options, because I do feel like the rates of suicide in our veterans is disproportionately high. And I want to do anything I can to help them know about all of their options.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you, Dustin.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed. Is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.